You're lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling while she sleeps beside you, and you realize something terrifying. The woman you thought would complete your life has become the reason you barely recognize yourself anymore. Your bank account is drained, your dreams are abandoned, your freedom is a distant memory. And the worst part? You did this to yourself. You walked into the trap willingly, smiling, convinced you were choosing happiness when you were actually signing away everything that made you, you. Carl Jung warned us. Arthur Schopenhauer screamed it from the rooftops, but nobody listened. And now millions of men are living in quiet desperation, wondering how the hell they got here. Today, we're ripping off the Band-Aid. These are the 10 dark truths about love that destroy men, the ones nobody talks about because they're too busy selling you the fairy tale. And by the end of this, you'll understand why the smartest men in history stayed single, and why the cost of love might be higher than you ever imagined. Let's start with the truth that shatters everything. Love isn't what you think it is. Society sold you a beautiful lie. They told you love is a spiritual connection, a meeting of souls, the universe bringing two people together. But Jung and Schopenhauer understood something far more brutal. What you call love is your unconscious mind hijacking your consciousness to fulfill biological and psychological programming that has nothing to do with your happiness. Jung called it the anima projection. You don't fall in love with a real woman. You fall in love with the feminine image that's been buried in your unconscious since childhood. Every man carries inside him an image of the perfect woman, a composite of his mother, his early experiences, his unmet needs, and his unconscious desires. When you meet someone who resembles this internal image, your brain floods with chemicals. Dopamine, oxytocin, norepinephrine, you call it chemistry, but it's really just your psyche recognizing a projection screen. She's not who you think she is. She's who you need her to be to fulfill a psychological pattern you're not even aware of. Schopenhauer went even darker. He said love is the will to live using you as a puppet to create the next generation. Your DNA doesn't care if you're happy. It cares if you reproduce. So it drugs you with feelings, makes you obsess over someone, convinces you that this specific person is essential to your existence. And once you're locked in, once the contract is signed and the chemicals fade, you're left with reality. A stranger sitting across from you at breakfast, someone whose actual personality might be completely incompatible with yours. But by then it's too late. The projection has served its purpose. This is why men feel so betrayed after the honeymoon phase ends. She changed, they say, but she didn't change. She was never who you thought she was. You were in love with a ghost, a psychological projection, and now you're legally and financially bound to the real person underneath. The second dark truth cuts even deeper. Love makes you stupid, and stupidity makes you poor. There's a reason broke men stay broke, and successful men who fall in love often lose everything. When you're in love, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making, literally shuts down. Brain scans of people in love look identical to brain scans of people on cocaine. You're high, impaired, incapable of seeing red flags or making sound judgments. This is when you make the worst decisions of your life. You buy the ring you can't afford because she deserves it. You move to the city she wants even though it destroys your career. You abandon your business because she needs more attention. You stop investing in yourself because she says you're being selfish. Every decision gets filtered through her emotions, her insecurity, her need for security, and slowly, methodically, your financial future crumbles. Jung understood this as the dissolution of the ego. When you fall in love, your sense of self merges with hers. Your goals become shared goals, which means they're no longer your goals. Your money becomes our money, which means you lose control of your financial destiny. Your time becomes couple time, which means your side business dies, your skills atrophy, and your market value decreases. Schopenhauer saw this as nature's cruelest trick. The same intense feelings that make you want to provide and protect also make you vulnerable to exploitation. Not because women are evil, but because the dynamic itself is exploitative. She needs security, you provide it. She needs emotional validation, you provide it. She needs your time, energy, resources, and attention. You provide it all. And what do you get? The privilege of continuing to provide. Watch what happens to men's net worth after marriage. It doesn't double because two incomes are better than one. It stagnates or declines because expenses explode, risk tolerance vanishes, and the man stops making bold moves. The entrepreneur becomes an employee because employees have benefits and she needs security. The investor becomes a saver because saving feels safe and she fears loss. The man building an empire becomes a man managing a household, and empires aren't built by men who need permission to take risks. Here's the third truth, and it's the one that destroys more men than anything else. The woman you love will never love you the way you love her, not because she's incapable, but because female love is fundamentally conditional. This isn't misogyny. This is biology and psychology combined. Jung explained that men and women experience love through completely different archetypes. Men love through the anima, which idealizes, romanticizes, and pedestalizes. When a man loves, he sees the woman as perfect, irreplaceable, the answer to everything. He would die for her, sacrifice for her, give up everything for her. This is why men write poetry, fight wars, and build monuments for women. Male love is transcendent, unconditional, often irrational. Female love operates through the animus, which evaluates, compares, and measures. A woman's love is deeply tied to what you provide, who you are, and how you make her feel relative to other options. This isn't cruelty. This is evolutionary psychology. For millions of years, a woman's survival and her children's survival depended on choosing a mate who could protect and provide. She couldn't afford unconditional love. She needed strategic love, love that ensured survival. This is why female attraction is so contingent on status, resources, and strength. You lose your job, she loses attraction. You show weakness, she loses respect. You stop being the man she fell for, she stops feeling what she felt. Schopenhauer understood this as the will expressing itself through different strategies. Men spread their genetic material through intensity and sacrifice. Women secure genetic quality through selection and evaluation. Neither is wrong, but they're incompatible. And this creates the fundamental tragedy of male-female relationships. The man gives everything and expects loyalty in return. The woman evaluates constantly and withdraws when the equation no longer makes sense. This is why divorce rates spike when men lose their jobs, why women initiate 70% of divorces, why men are blindsided when she leaves because to him, love meant forever. But to her, love meant as long as conditions remain favorable. The fourth dark truth is even more insidious because it happens so gradually, you don't notice until it's too late. Love doesn't add to your life, it replaces it. Before her, you had a life. You had friends, hobbies, goals, routines, things that made you who you are. You went to the gym without asking permission. You spent Saturdays working on your business. You traveled when you wanted, ate what you wanted, and spent your money how you wanted. Then she arrived, and slowly, imperceptibly, your life became our life. Your friends became the guys you used to hang out with. Your hobbies became things you don't have time for anymore. Your goals became things we'll do someday. Jung called this the integration of the anima, but what it really is the dissolution of the self. Your identity merges with hers, and in that merging, you disappear. Not because she demanded it, but because the relationship demands it. You can't maintain your single life while building a life together. Something has to give, and what gives is always you. Your gym time becomes selfish. Your boys' night becomes neglect. Your ambition becomes insensitivity to her needs. And here's the cruel paradox. The very things that made you attractive, your independence, your drive, your mysterious separateness, are the first things to go. She fell in love with a man who had his own life, but the relationship requires you to abandon that life. So you do. You sacrifice your gym membership for couple time. You abandon your startup for a stable job. You stop taking risks because she needs security. You become a version of yourself that's acceptable to the relationship, and that version is always smaller, safer, more boring than who you were before. Schopenhauer saw this as the death of individual will. When you merge your life with someone else's, you're no longer living your life. You're managing a shared existence, and shared existence always trends toward mediocrity because it's limited by the lowest common denominator. She doesn't like your friends, so you see them less. She doesn't understand your business, so you pursue it less aggressively. She needs emotional availability, so you sacrifice the solitude that made you creative, focused, and powerful. And the most terrifying part is how quickly it happens. 6 months in, you're still mostly yourself. A year in, you notice you haven't seen your best friend in months. 2 years in, you can't remember the last time you did something just for yourself. 5 years in, you look in the mirror and don't recognize the man staring back. This is what Jung meant by the shadow. All the parts of yourself you've suppressed to maintain the relationship don't disappear. They go underground, festering, creating depression, resentment, and a quiet rage you can't quite explain. The fifth truth is where it gets truly dark, because this is about what you lose that you can never get back. Time. The most valuable resource you have, more valuable than money, more valuable than anything, is time. And love consumes it like fire consumes oxygen. Schopenhauer understood that genius requires time, focus, and the freedom to pursue ideas without interruption. Every great work of art, philosophy, science, and business was created by someone who had the time and space to focus completely. But relationships are time vampires. Not because women are demanding, but because relationships themselves demand constant maintenance. Emotional check-ins, quality time, conflict resolution, compromise discussions, family obligations, social events, date nights, household management, and the endless emotional labor of making sure she feels loved, valued, and secure. A single man with discipline can work 12 hours a day on his purpose. He can read for hours, think for hours, create for hours without interruption. He controls his time completely. A married man works 8 hours at his job, comes home to emotional labor, spends his evening managing household dynamics, and collapses into bed with maybe 30 minutes of freedom if he's lucky. His weekends aren't for building empires. They're for errands, family time, and recovering from the week. This is why history's greatest achievers were either single or had wives who basically didn't exist in their daily lives. Newton, Tesla, Kant, Beethoven, Nietzsche, all single. Their time was their own, and they used it to create things that outlasted every marriage of their era. Jung himself, despite being married, spent enormous amounts of time alone in his tower, working on ideas without interruption. He understood that psychological depth requires solitude and time. But modern relationships don't allow this. Your girlfriend or wife expects daily engagement, constant communication, and emotional availability. Your time is no longer yours. It's negotiated, shared, and ultimately lost to the maintenance of the relationship itself. And here's what nobody tells you. You don't get that time back. Every year spent managing someone else's emotions is a year not spent building your empire. Every evening spent in conflict resolution is an evening not spent mastering your craft. Every weekend spent at her family's house is a weekend not spent on the project that could change your life. The seventh dark truth reveals the mechanism of your destruction, and it's so subtle you'll miss it until the damage is done. Her emotions become your responsibility, and that responsibility will drain every ounce of your energy until there's nothing left. Jung identified this as the phenomenon of emotional possession. When a man enters a relationship, he unconsciously takes on the role of emotional regulator for his partner. Her anxiety becomes something you must fix. Her insecurity becomes something you must manage. Her happiness becomes something you must create. And here's the trap. Female emotions are infinite. There's no amount of reassurance that permanently eliminates insecurity. There's no amount of attention that permanently satisfies the need for validation. There's no amount of success that permanently erases anxiety about the future. You're trying to fill a bottomless well with a leaky bucket, and you'll die trying. Schopenhauer understood this as the will manifesting through endless desire. Human beings are wanting machines. We achieve one thing and immediately want the next. Satisfaction is always temporary. Desire is permanent. So when you make her happiness your mission, you've accepted an impossible task. You calm her anxiety today, it returns tomorrow. You prove your love this week, she needs proof again next week. You provide security this month, she fears losing it next month. Your entire existence becomes an exhausting cycle of emotional labor that never ends and never succeeds because the goalpost constantly moves. And the worst part is how this dynamic destroys your masculine core. Jung described masculine energy as logos, rationality, order, purpose, mission. But when you're constantly managing emotions, you're operating in the realm of eros, feeling, chaos, and reaction. You lose your center. Your mission becomes managing her moods. Your purpose becomes keeping her happy. Your days are dictated not by your goals, but by her emotional state. Did she wake up anxious? Your morning is gone. Did something upset her at work? Your evening is consumed. Is she feeling insecure about the relationship? Your weekend is spent reassuring instead of building. This is why men in relationships look so tired. They're not just working their jobs. They're working a second full-time job as emotional firefighters, constantly putting out fires that spontaneously reignite because emotions aren't problems to be solved. They're experiences to be felt, processed and released, but she's not releasing them. She's transferring them to you, and you're accepting them because you've been taught that this is what love looks like. But Schopenhauer knew better. This isn't love. This is codependent servitude disguised as partnership. Real love, if such a thing exists beyond biological programming, would make both people stronger, more capable, more free. But what passes for love in modern relationships makes men weaker, more anxious, more trapped. The eighth truth exposes the financial devastation that love inflicts, and it's far worse than the cost of a wedding. When you commit to a woman, you commit to funding a lifestyle that will drain your wealth for decades. Schopenhauer observed that marriage is a debt you enter with your eyes open, but can never repay. The wedding is just the down payment. Then comes the house she needs to feel secure, bigger than you can afford, but you buy it anyway. The car she wants because she deserves nice things. The furniture, the renovations, the vacations she saw on Instagram. Every financial decision becomes a negotiation where your logic loses to her emotions. You want to invest in assets. She wants to spend on experiences. You want to take calculated risks. She wants guaranteed security. You want to build wealth. She wants to display status. And her preferences always win because peace is more valuable than money. And disagreeing means conflict, and conflict means emotional labor. And emotional labor is exhausting, so you just agree. You sign the loan. You buy the car. You book the vacation. And your path to financial independence gets longer and longer. Jung understood this as the anima's demand for material manifestation. The feminine archetype seeks security through physical things: home, comfort, beauty, stability. These aren't bad desires, but they're incompatible with wealth building because wealth building requires the opposite: risk, discomfort, delayed gratification, and aggressive capital allocation. But you can't do this when you're funding her emotional need for security through consumption. And then comes the ultimate financial trap: children. Schopenhauer called children the ultimate expression of the will's deception. You think you want them, but what you want is the feeling of wanting them, and that feeling was placed in you by biology to ensure the species continues. The reality of children is financial annihilation. $300,000 to raise one child to 18, and that's assuming nothing goes wrong. College? Add another $200,000, and during those 18 years your ability to take risks, change careers, start businesses, or pursue opportunities evaporates because you can't risk the stability they need. You're locked into the job you hate because it has benefits. You're stuck in the city you despise because she won't move the kids. You're trapped in a life that's slowly killing you because escape would mean destroying your children's stability. So you stay. You endure. You die slowly inside while maintaining the appearance of success. And here's the darkest part. If the relationship ends, and statistically it probably will, you don't just lose your present, you lose your future. Divorce courts don't care about equality. They care about maintaining her lifestyle and the children's stability, which means you're paying for a house you don't live in, funding a life you're not part of, and supporting her while she potentially dates someone else. You become a financial slave to a failed relationship, working not for your future, but to maintain the remnants of a past you can't escape. Schopenhauer would call this hell, and he'd be right. The ninth truth reveals why you'll never win, no matter what you do. The same qualities that make her fall in love with you are the qualities she'll eventually resent you for. Jung identified this pattern in countless patients. A woman is attracted to masculine traits: confidence, independence, strength, ambition, emotional stability. These are the qualities that trigger her biological attraction. But once she's locked you into a relationship, these same qualities become problems. Your confidence becomes arrogance. Your independence becomes emotional unavailability. Your strength becomes insensitivity. Your ambition becomes neglect. Your emotional stability becomes coldness. Why does this happen? Because what women select for in the mating phase contradicts what they need in the attachment phase. During attraction, they want the alpha, strong, independent, dominant, focused on his mission. During attachment, they want the beta, attentive, emotionally available, prioritizing her needs, present and engaged. But these are fundamentally incompatible behavioral patterns. You can't be both simultaneously. If you maintain the alpha traits that attracted her, she'll complain you're not emotionally available enough. If you develop the beta traits she says she wants, she'll lose attraction and respect. This is the double bind that destroys men. Schopenhauer understood this as the will's inherent contradiction. Nature needs you to be attractive enough to be selected and docile enough to be controlled. But these states are mutually exclusive, so you're constantly adjusting, trying to find the balance, but the balance doesn't exist. You're strong, she wants vulnerability. You're vulnerable, she wants strength. You're focused on your mission, she wants attention. You give her attention, she wants you to have a mission. There's no winning because the game itself is rigged. And the most devastating part of this truth is how it erodes your sense of self. You stop knowing who you are because you're constantly shape-shifting to meet contradictory demands. Are you the confident man or the sensitive man? The driven man or the present man? The leader or the equal partner? You're all of them and none of them, a chameleon changing colors to avoid conflict, and in the process, you lose your core identity. Jung called this ego dissolution, and it's one of the primary causes of male depression in relationships. You've abandoned your authentic self to become what she needs in any given moment. But what she needs keeps changing, so you're perpetually inadequate. You're always wrong, always falling short, always failing to be what she wants because what she wants is impossible. She wants the fantasy man who doesn't exist, the one who is simultaneously alpha and beta, strong and sensitive, independent and devoted, ambitious and present. And you're killing yourself trying to become this fiction while your real self dies of neglect. The 10th and final dark truth is the one that brings it all together. The meta-truth that explains why all the other truths exist and why escaping them is nearly impossible. You're biologically programmed to enslave yourself, and consciousness is the only way out. This is where Jung and Schopenhauer converge into one devastating insight. You are not primarily a conscious being making rational choices. You are primarily an unconscious being driven by forces you don't understand, and those forces are using consciousness as a tool to justify decisions that have already been made. Jung's concept of the unconscious reveals that most of your personality, your desires, and your behaviors are determined by factors outside your awareness. Childhood experiences, archetypal patterns, collective programming, biological imperatives. When you think you're choosing to pursue a woman, you're not choosing. Your anima is activated. Your biology is triggered. Your unconscious is fulfilling a pattern. Schopenhauer went even further. He argued that consciousness is a late evolutionary development, a thin layer over the massive unconscious will that drives all life. This will wants one thing, to perpetuate itself. And it will use any method to achieve this, including convincing you that enslaving yourself to a woman and children is what you want. This is why logic doesn't work on matters of love. You can know intellectually that relationships are traps. You can understand all 9 previous truths completely. But when you meet someone who triggers your anima projection, when your biology floods you with chemicals, when your unconscious activates the pair bonding program, all that knowledge evaporates. You rationalize. You make exceptions. You tell yourself this time is different. You convince yourself that you're choosing freely when you're really just obeying programming. And this is the ultimate tragedy of the masculine condition. Unlike women, whose biological programming aligns reasonably well with their happiness, female biology rewards them for securing resources and stability. Men's biological programming actively works against their self-interest. Your biology wants you to sacrifice everything for reproduction. Your consciousness wants freedom, achievement, and self-actualization. These are at war, and biology usually wins because it operates beneath awareness. This is why Schopenhauer advocated for the life of ascetic contemplation, and why Jung emphasized individuation over relationship. Both understood that the only path to freedom is becoming conscious of the forces driving you, and then choosing to resist them. Not through repression, but through understanding. You don't ignore sexual desire. You understand it for what it is, biological programming. You don't hate women, you understand that they're also driven by unconscious forces. You don't swear off relationships forever. You understand the costs clearly and make conscious choices rather than unconscious reactions. This is what it means to integrate the shadow and individuate. You bring the unconscious into consciousness. You see the programming running beneath your thoughts. You recognize when your anima is activated. You notice when you're rationalizing biological impulses. And in that awareness, you gain the one thing that makes you truly human, choice. Not the illusion of choice you had before, but real choice born from understanding. You can choose to pursue relationships with full awareness of the costs. You can choose solitude with full awareness of what you're protecting. You can choose anything, but you're choosing consciously rather than being chosen by forces you don't understand. Not hatred of love, but transcendence of unconscious enslavement to it. Not avoidance of women, but awareness of the dynamics at play. Not cynicism about relationship, but clarity about what they cost, and whether that cost serves your highest becoming. And here's what happens when you achieve this consciousness. You stop being desperate. Desperation comes from unconscious need. When you understand that need, it loses its power. You stop pedestalizing women. Pedestalization comes from anima projection. When you understand the projection, you see the human being behind it. You stop sacrificing yourself. Sacrifice comes from biological programming. When you understand the program, you can choose whether to run it. You become dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous to social programming. Dangerous to biological manipulation. Dangerous to anyone trying to exploit your unconscious drives. You become a man who knows himself, and a man who knows himself cannot be controlled. This doesn't mean you'll never love. It means when you love, you'll love consciously, with full awareness of what you're doing and why. You won't be a slave to the feeling. You'll be a master of your choices. And that mastery, that consciousness, that hard-won freedom from unconscious programming is worth more than any relationship, any validation, any temporary pleasure that biology tries to sell you. These are the 10 dark truths. Love is projection, not connection. Love makes you stupid and poor. Female love is conditional. Love replaces your life instead of enhancing it. Love steals your time. Relationships interrupt your individuation. Her emotions become your burden. Love destroys your wealth. You can never satisfy contradictory demands, and you're biologically programmed to accept all of this, but you don't have to. Not anymore. Now that you know what Jung and Schopenhauer understood centuries ago, you have something most men never get. You have consciousness. You have clarity. You have choice. The question isn't whether these truths are depressing. The question is whether you're brave enough to face them, integrate them, and build a life that serves your highest potential rather than your lowest programming. That's the real work. Not finding love, not keeping a relationship, but becoming so conscious, so individuated, so clear about who you are and what you want that nothing, not biology, not society, not even the most intoxicating love, can divert you from your path. That's freedom. That's power. That's what these men understood and what you now understand too. The men who understand what you just learned don't stay silent. They know that consciousness spreads through shared truth. Drop one word in the comments right now. Write consciousness and let everyone know you see through the illusion. Your one word might be the trigger that wakes up another man trapped in the programming. The guys who write it understand something critical. They're not just watching content, they're building awareness. And that awareness is the first step toward freedom. While you're here, real quick, hit that subscribe button. Because this channel exists for one reason, to give you the uncomfortable truths that transform your life. Every video we create is designed to shatter one more illusion, to make you more conscious, more powerful, more free. The men who subscribe aren't looking for entertainment. They're looking for evolution. And that like button, when you click it, you're not just supporting the channel. You're telling the algorithm to show this truth to more men who desperately need to hear it. Your click literally saves someone from years of unconscious suffering. One click, massive impact. Now here's what's coming next, and this is where everything you just learned gets even darker. The next video reveals something so disturbing about human nature that most people can't handle it when they first hear it. But the guys who are ready, the ones who've already started waking up, they need this next piece. It connects directly to everything we just covered and takes your understanding to a level that changes how you see every interaction, every relationship, every choice you've ever made. That video drops soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. The truth only gets clearer from here.